So thanks so much for joining us for today's Tech Modernization Roundtable hosted by Edge, really focused on going from VMware to the cloud. I'm Adam Scarzafava, AVP for Marketing and Communications here at Edge. I'm going to be helping to facilitate some of the discussion today, but before we get into all that, I'd like to ask each of our participants here on the panel to introduce themselves, and then I'll give you a little bit of background and context for Edge and why we're bringing this group together today. But let's start with a round of introductions, and maybe Matt, you can kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Matt McGrath, and I lead our US public sector team for VMware Cloud on AWS at AWS. And for us, that's everything within traditional state, local education, as well as GovTech, EdTech, nonprofit healthcare, academic medical centers, and looking forward to talking to everybody today.
Thanks, Matt. Len, you want to jump in?
Hi, I'm Len Nebo. I am the Associate Vice President for Technology at the College of New Jersey. I, again, like Matt, looking forward to talking to everyone today and have a good conversation and talk about our cloud journey at TCNJ.
Thanks, Len. John?
Hey, John White, Chief Innovation Officer at Effectual. I have a pretty interesting, I think, blended background that would be good for today, so happy to answer anything. I spent a year previous to Effectual at AWS, focusing on helping C-level executives get through cloud journeys, hurdles, show them where the potholes, that kind of stuff. Before that, I spent 16 years building one of the largest VMware hosting providers inside the United States. So I've been working and moving customers to VMware since around 2006, 2007 timeframe. So it's been a greater majority of my life here. Looking forward to talking.
Great, thanks for joining us. And Leslie?
Hi, my name is Leslie Dalton, and I'm with Effectual as well. I'm a regional sales manager based here on the East Coast, and I look forward to today's session.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks for helping us out today. So just to get into, before we really dive into the content, just to set the table and provide some context for why Edge is helping to facilitate this discussion today, for those who may not be as familiar with us. So Edge is a nonprofit member-based research and education network and a technology partner. We were formed by the New Jersey President's Council for Higher Education back around the turn of the century, when those presidents came together and came to the realization that they needed a partner and a service provider to help them really excel in the digital world, and that's what Edge was formed to do. The mission has grown beyond just higher education in the following years to include really focused support for research under higher ed, the K-12 world, state and local government, libraries, healthcare, other nonprofits, really anybody with a public serving mission. Edge is there to serve them in the effective use of technology. And we do that in a few different ways. We were initially formed to build a network around the state of New Jersey, a network which has grown now to have points of presence in Pennsylvania and New York as well, but is really purpose-built for the challenges and opportunities that the higher education world faces, with a level of service that we really know we need to provide to our members so that they can facilitate those educational journeys. Edge Discovery is a really is a new and growing part of Edge, but really focused on research and enabling research through the effective use of technology. Edge Market is our strategic and informed consortium procurement arm, which really dives into a few different options for procurement, including an actual purchasing cooperative that Edge runs, where we can issue RFPs on behalf of the entire public sector community and make technologies available for purchase. Events, networking, and community building, just like what we're doing here today. And then thought leadership and solution development, where Edge is able to provide a number of services ourselves to our members with a nonprofit perspective, including the ability to provide on an hourly basis virtual chief information security officer services and assessments that work alongside those. Things like instructional design and technology support to help to scale things like online learning for our members, digital transformation support in general, helping use data effectively, all kinds of things there. And then cloud strategy. And we do some of that stuff ourselves, but very often we really need to lean on partners as we survey the market and where things are going and where innovation is really happening. And that's what's led us to today's discussion. And pulling in a number of really exciting partners like VMC on AWS, as well as a brand new partner in Effectual, who is going to, we believe, help to make the journey from VMware on-prem, the usual business as usual with VMware, into the cloud a bit easier and a bit more effective for for some of our members out there who might not be able to jump into something like VMC on AWS themselves. So we're going to have a really kind of interactive and well-rounded discussion here where we'll learn a bit about VMC on AWS as a baseline to kind of set the table, learn a bit about the journey from TCNJ of moving into the cloud and starting to take advantage of some of those services, and then open up for a wider discussion to think about a number of the dynamics in play as folks start to consider how they might move from VMware out into the cloud. So I think with that, I will get out of the way for now and invite Matt to share his screen and get into setting some of that baseline for VMC on AWS and how it came about.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate that. And thank you again, Adam. So like I mentioned, my name is Matt McGrath, and I am responsible for VMware Cloud on AWS for our public sector customers here at AWS. And what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit of background about VMware Cloud and AWS, how it kind of came to be, where our customers are finding value in it. And by all means, ask any questions you may have. So like I mentioned, I work here at AWS, but previous to that, I spent 6 years at VMware. And previous to that, I spent 15 years with Avar based out of Somerset, New Jersey. And that whole time was dedicated to serving the state, local, and educational customers within the state, kind of within the tri-state area. And back when we first started, we would sell single servers. You'd load up an operating system. If you needed two for, say, redundancy, you'd have to buy another, maybe a third for test dev. It was pretty expensive. People would build out their data centers. It could get very costly. VMware came along, and they had vSphere, which abstracted the operating system from the physical infrastructure, allowing customers to run 10, 20, 30, 50 VMs on a single host. They improved that to add things like high availability and fault tolerance, and allowed customers to really create their own private cloud on-prem. So about 7 years ago, they acquired a company called Nicira, which became NSX, or software-defined networking. And they came out with a platform called vSAN, or software-defined storage. And by combining those technologies, VMware came out with something called the software-defined data center. And it opened up some really interesting opportunities. And at the request of our customers in 2016, VMware, right, the leading private cloud provider in AWS, the leading public cloud provider, got together and allowed you to start running VMware's software-defined data center inside AWS's enterprise infrastructure. And for our customers, what that allowed them to do was to take all the skills that they had, all the tooling they have, all the VMs that they've created on premise, and allowed them to leverage them inside AWS enterprise infrastructure, allowed them to now get access to scaling up on demand, growing out when they need more, shrinking back when they need less, but also gives them access into AWS's incredible native services. And since 2017, on our initial GA date, there's been over 200 service improvements. We're available in almost every one of our regions globally, and certainly within the US, including our FedRAMP regions in the West and the East. So if you do have a requirement where maybe you're working with some highly regulated industries and you need that FedRAMP high certification, we have that for you. If you're working within the healthcare organization, I mentioned we work with them as well. We have HIPAA certifications. We can work on BAAs with you. But as you can see, these service improvements really come from the fact that this is the only service out there that's built and managed by VMware and AWS. So this is a full managed service. VMware software, they run. We obviously run the physical infrastructure. And because of that, we have access to all the latest and greatest software. So if you think about things like VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery, VCDR, that's available to you. If you're looking to do next generation security with IPS and IDS within NSX, those are also available to you. Also, because this has been around for so long and we had over 8,400 customers use or are using the platform, we've been able to collect a lot of data. And we partnered with the IDC, and there's a link down here at the bottom that you'll have access to after the conversation. And there's a 21-page report that kind of came out with what are customers saying about their experiencing moving over to VMware Cloud and AWS. And I pulled out some of the things that I thought were really highlights for customers that I see. So kind of focusing in over here on the right. For a lot of our customers, as you think about the complexity of building out VMware environments on premise, right? Hardware, software compatibility, 43% reduction in total cost of operations. And you think about things like uptime and availability, a 76% reduction in downtime. We have a great customer reference based out of the Northeast, 22 hospitals, 700 outpatient locations, saving $51 million over 5 years, $26 million in operations, $24 million in physical infrastructure by leveraging VMware Cloud on AWS to extend their on-premise Horizon environment and support all of those agencies virtually from the cloud. So pretty cool story. The other side to the left, 46% faster cloud migrations. We have an incredible story with one of our partners, MIT, based out of Cambridge, Mass. They talked at one of our reInvent sessions about their experiencing moving to VMware Cloud on AWS. And it's recorded on YouTube, so we can share that as well at the end of this conversation. But you get to listen to Mark Silas talk about his journey and their ability to move 300 workloads in 96 hours, so like a long weekend. That was so successful that they chose to move 2,800 workloads to VMware Cloud on AWS. It took 2 months, 1 FTE, 0 downtime. So the ease and speed of migrating to the cloud, because you can retain your workloads as they're built today and migrate them into VMware Cloud on AWS. So let's talk a little bit about what it actually looks like, right? And so this is a high level design, but we'll walk you through it quickly. So to the far left, that's your data center, right? All we require is that you run vSphere. We like 6.5 because it enables us to do a lot of cool things. We can go backwards down to 5.5, but you would have to shut a VM off to move it. But as long as you're running 6.5, we can connect your vCenter to VMware Cloud on AWS. Your admins or folks that are working within the VMware environments now can access both environments through vCenter and be able to seamlessly migrate those workloads over. We ride over a VPN or a direct connect or our own private link if you have a lot of high-speed bandwidth that you need. But once you're here, you have access to VMware software-defined data center stack. It is, again, a managed service. So VMware is going to take care of all of the management planning, making sure everything works together. And you're going to own that OS level up. The other part I want to draw your attention to is really this orange arrow. And this, I think, is really the key differentiator between us and kind of the rest of the world. That's what we call an elastic network interface, or an ENI. And that's what's going to give you access into AWS's native services. And the key thing that I see a lot of customers focus on are really 3 things. It's compute, storage, and database. And for people that are getting started with the cloud, those are the 3 easiest places to work with VMware Cloud on AWS. So we talk about storage. If you were to put a 10 terabyte file server on VMware Cloud on AWS, it can get pretty expensive. But we have purpose-built platforms like FSx, which is a managed Windows file server, where we take care of the patching, management, updating, and you access it just like a file server. We also have the ability, recently announced, a partnership with NetApp to be able to run ONTAP. So you can actually now load that up with VMDKs and boot from that as well. We also have other services like S3, our simple storage service, very low cost place for you to put object-based storage, and things like EC2, our Elastic Compute Cloud. We have a lot of customers that leverage EC2 with our Amazon Machine Images, AMIs, with S3, where you can partner with Veeam, Cohesity, Commvault, Veritas, a ton of different backup partners to run that simply and easily in our native service, but recover into VMware Cloud on AWS. So really a compelling solution when you add those 2 environments together. So some of the key use cases that I talked about, right? Data center extension for a lot of our customers that are having some difficult times getting access to physical infrastructure. Simple, easy way for you to extend your clusters up into the cloud. Disaster recovery, we're going to hear from Len in just a moment about his journey to that, as well as cloud migrations. I told you the MIT story, and we'll share the links so you can go listen, and then the next generation application. So as you think about what your migration strategy is to get to the cloud, a lot of customers want to focus on migration year 1, stabilize and optimize in year 2. How can we make some improvements? And then modernize in year 3. VMware Cloud on AWS is going to help support you throughout that life cycle. Mr. Nebo, sir, I'm going to hand the ball over to you.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Mr. Nebo, that's my dad, not me. Allow me to share screen here. Hit share. All right. So College of New Jersey case study for VMware Cloud on AWS. Give you a little bit of background first about our institution. We're located in Ewing, New Jersey on 289 tree line acres. And I lifted that right from the marketing brochures of the TCNJ admissions office. We're highly selective and recognized as one of the top comprehensive colleges in the nation. And if you've noticed lately, we have a whole bunch of billboards running up and down the Parkway or the Turnpike and 287 that show just that. We're, whether they say #1 from Maine to Maryland is seems to be our new tagline there. And we have approximately 7,500 students, mostly undergraduate across 7 schools, with a graduate presence of about 12 to 1,500 students, primarily in education and nursing. So background about us at TCNJ in terms of our information technology department. So we have about 55 staff members across 6 IT divisions. And I'd like to put this slide up just to give some background as far as what we have as far as resources, boots on the ground, implementing technology at TCNJ. So this way you can get a good comparison to your institution and where you're at in your journey here. So, the divisions that we have are enterprise applications, infrastructure, IT business and finance, user support services, MTSS, media and technology support services, which is our classroom, projectors, podiums, that sort of thing. And then we also have Office of Institutional Research. Enterprise infrastructure was where I came into TCNJ. I was first started at TCNJ about 6 years ago as the head of the enterprise infrastructure team, and then moved up to associate CIO and now CIO for the past 12, 14 months or so at the college. So, enterprise infrastructure is ingrained in me. I'm also, an educator. My whole life I've been in education, K-12 and higher ed now for almost 20 something years. So, it's a good crossroads between the tech. One of the things I like to say is that a good meld of the and blend of educational technology and also enterprise infrastructure and technology itself. So again, enterprise infrastructure includes servers, networking, telecom, and the tagline that I use all the time is "We make IT work." So we have our institutional goals and our mission statements and what we want to get done as an institution at TCNJ. And I think really the biggest piece to this is to evaluate the current trends and initiatives that we've already had in progress, right? You don't always want to build on what you have and that kind of do that whole piece where you're ripping and tearing or tearing down and then having to build back up again, and then create a core infrastructure upon which to build upon. Strong foundation gives you a good platform to move forward in the future. Without that strong foundation, you're not really going anywhere and probably end up having to do that just downward spiral of build, tear down, build again, tear down, right? So you want to have that core infrastructure foundation. And one of the TCNJ, one of our big projects that we had going on at the time was ubiquitous wireless access that's for easy to use. Server virtualization and consolidation. TCNJ been doing that for years prior to when I got there 6 years ago. And that served the institution well. And when I came in, it was really a matter of where can we use that as a launch pad? Again, using that foundation that had already been there and been done well, and then launch that off and go into a new direction. Network infrastructure upgrade as well. We had done some fiber and some networking infrastructure upgrades at the time. And then, layered on top of all those core items are your security access control and cameras, which is under IT's purview. And then a big piece that we got into, it was construction and renovation. And when I say get into, I mean that we were now at a seat at the table when any construction or renovation project was going on campus. We weren't the last to know and the last in the door, right? You don't want that scenario of, okay, the paint's on the walls, carpet's on the floors, and now go ahead, IT, you guys, do your thing and, run some cable and put some jacks on the walls. And you want to be there when the walls aren't walled in and and you want to be at that table when the designs are actually happening, especially also now with digital signage and display technology. We want to make sure that we're at the table when the designs are being done and not as an afterthought. And the ultimate goal in all of this, and I think for us at TCNJ and really for any institution at this point in I want to say post-COVID world or in COVID world or tail end of COVID world, whatever you want to describe it, is anywhere, anytime, any device access to all the resources we have at TCNJ. And that's been the guiding principle for us the last couple of years. Even I want to say even that was pre-COVID. We had thrown I used it at the time, it was AAA. It was anytime, anywhere, any device, right? Threw out there. And now we're actually into the 4As, which is anywhere, anytime, any device, and any application for students to get to. And that was, put in place before COVID, and it served us well throughout the last 18, 24 months during COVID. So the other piece that we have is we call a cloud first approach. And that is, any new project or initiative is viewed from this perspective, right? If there's a cloud option for it, we'll take a look at it, make sure that it does, exactly what it says it's going to do. If there's an on-prem version versus a cloud version, and they have equal functionality, then the cloud version will be the one that we would lean towards, unless there's some other option. And is that viable and cost effective for us? Because sometimes you get into the cloud versions of some products, and that just kind of blows the budget out of the water, and you have to take a step back and say, okay, is it really worth it, or can we look at something on-prem or a hybrid or something like that? And back to the functionality piece. And if it is an on-prem solution, then it's got to be be able to put into the VM farm, right, and be able to be virtualized. And there's a whole roadmap of what we do with servers, the virtual servers, in terms of like backups and updates and that sort of thing, so that this way, we know that that those servers are being met with their needs. The other initiative that we have going on at TCNJ as well for the past several years is what I call scalable, agile, and nimble. And in combination with the cloud first approach, all the projects that we move forward are going to be viewed by the following questions. And that is it scalable, right? Can the product solution scale up or down to serve the goals of TCNJ? The college has the strategic goals, and as the IT department, we enable and help and make sure that we're moving towards completing those strategic goals, and we're in lockstep with that and moving forward. And can these solutions scale up or back depending on either are we going all remote, are we going hybrid, are we all on-prem? In pre-COVID, it was always like, well, what if I get everyone logging in at the same time? Is it going to be able to handle that sort of thing? So can the project scale? And then, everybody talks about scalability going up, but there's also, times when we all know as a higher education institution, the calendar dictates what resources are needed and when they're needed, right? Beginning of the semester, high availability, high resources, everybody's coming back, logging in, doing everything when they get back to campus in August, September, right? Then usually come October, November, you have registration for spring semester, and you got to scale up, right? And then after that, but when registration's over, maybe at that point you can scale down and not have to use so much resources that's there, instead of always having a size a box or size a solution to whatever you think the maximum is going to be. Now you can go with the ebb and the flow of the semester based on what you need at that moment for what's happening on campus. And then, is it agile? Do we have resources in place? And when I say resources, it's not just the technical resources. We all think about, do I have the servers? Do I have the switches? Do I have the bandwidth? Do I have fiber and copper to be able to handle that? But it's also about human capital. Or do we have the employees and the skill sets to be able to do the projects that we want to do? And let's face it, in the last several years, we've had to really be agile in terms of okay, maybe your position was always on-prem and that's what you did. Well, now in a hybrid world or in a full remote world, well, now if your position was all about being on campus all the time, well, that's we need to work something out and figure out how we can best use your skill sets and your ability, and maybe in other areas that allow you to be remote, where you're always on-prem before. And then nimble, okay, excuse me, can we move in a different direction as needed? And, technology is ever evolving, and there's trends and innovations and things that we talked about just a couple of years ago are now, outdated. You got Moore's laws out there. Matt talked even about, new products and new integrations within VMware on AWS, and that's new within the past, 6, 8, 10 months or so. So, it's can a project be nimble enough to be able to move in different directions as needed for what we need at that point in time. So I talk about a decade of virtualization. It really goes back to the bare metal boxes to virtualization, and we have our clusters, over 300 servers, and like I said, TCNJ did a really good job with our VMware solution throughout the 2010, 11, 12, 13, all the way up, and that's kind of just tried and true, right? It just works. You have your clusters, it works. It's rock solid. It's VMware's bread and butter, their core services, right? So what's the kind of the next step? What's the next evolutionary step in that process to be able to leverage that core? Remember, I talked about the core and the foundation of being able to have a good foundation. We have a great foundation. We had our VMware solution and our ESX host that have been rock solid. So where do we want to take that? And then this kind of moves into another piece that we've been working with at TCNJ is an evolution of our physical space, and that is our data centers. And we have a main data center at Green Hall, and we have another data center at Cromwell Hall, which is a little bit smaller. We were talking about maybe consolidating, using putting all production servers in one, backup servers in another, test and dev servers in one, and production in another. And then also just about storage, like where we're going to do our 30-day full backups, and leveraging maybe an outside entity like this project, really this VMC on AWS project. The genesis of it, or the little seedling of it, really started at a conversation of what do we want to do with our 30-day full Veeam backups, and put them in maybe into S3 for storage. And then we were talking to Matt when VMC, and then also our VMware and our VMware TAM at the time. And we started talking about, just doing that. And then it kind of grew into this evolution of, well, what about, your ESX host, and what could we do with that? And really create almost like a tertiary data center up in the cloud with VMware on AWS. The phrase that I use all the time, and I know probably people are probably tired of it in my department at IT, is, what if the meteor hit TCNJ? What could we be able to do after the fact, right? Could we run payroll? Could everybody get paid on Friday? Could we get purchase orders out? Could we be that resilient or bulletproof if something really catastrophic happened? And these discussions are excuse me, pretty prescient for today, because we're actually talking about it with Green Hall, is one of the oldest buildings on campus, and that's our main data center. And we've been talking with facilities and maintenance about some steam pipes that are run underneath the ground, underneath the floor in the data center, that are not looking so good at this moment in time. And what are we gonna, what could we do to alleviate that? And what if something happened in Green Hall where those steam pipes broke or something else happened? We also know that there's probably going to be some renovations in that building in the near future. And we're not just talking like, oh, we're going to paint or do some new windows, some major renovations. Well, how do we keep that data center up and running, or can we keep that data center up and running while those massive renovations happen? So, what started out as a small conversation about really just blob storage in S3 is really blossomed and into this solution, but it keeps on coming up over and over and over again. And back to the agility piece, can this solution be agile enough to deal with the needs that we have right now, like with Green Hall being a candidate for a major renovation, and we may need to move that data center that's been there for 20 years or so out of that area. And we were actually looking at other spaces like in our education building and some newer spaces. We're even doing a colo with NJFX with NJ Edge to be able to do that. So the speed at which all these cloud solutions are evolving is, when you take a step back, it's staggering just how quickly these things evolve, right? And, can you leverage what you already have? And I think that's a really big component for VMC on AWS is leveraging what you already have. We already have VMware on-premise clusters, right? And we already have the skill sets. Again, we always seem to talk about the technology and the stuff and the bare metal boxes and the networking equipment, but can we leverage the skill sets and knowledge of our existing employees without having to go back and retrain everybody on some new technology or new solution that we're ripping and tearing out and putting something new in? That's not going to happen. We've invested a lot of money and time and effort over the years, again, back to layering technology and layering skill sets throughout those years. There's a lot of knowledge in our employees of how to use VMware and how to work with it, and they just know it, right? So and to expect them to turn around and do a 90-degree or 180-degree turn and go to do something else is just, it's an impossible task. So you need to, recognize that and leverage those skill sets. And then also, can you have the ability to mix and match your cloud to your comfortability level, right? You want to be 90-10, 90% on-prem and 10% in the cloud. You can do that. You want to be 10% on-prem and 90% in the cloud. You can do that as well. And, I use the phrase all the time, the great slider bar, right? Can we move that slider bar back and forth to the left or to the right of that number based on, what either your comfort level is or back to the scalability of resources, meaning like, hey, maybe now we can turn down some resources up in the cloud, save some money, and then turn that back down, bring them back on-prem if we need them, because we know we're in like a downtime, like the summer, or it's post-registration time or something like that. Again, back, using that calendar to your advantage and being able to do that. And when you're fully on-prem, or you're, like I said, you're always trying to hit that maximum, right? Like, what do you think is your maximum load that you have? You buy the hardware to that maximum, but you only use 2%, 1%, right? Maybe once or twice a year, you hit the 60, 70%, but you had to invest all that money and time into the hardware part of it. But you only ever hit that max for a very limited amount of, if you look at, the total number of uptime minutes in a year, maybe you're only hitting that uptime for less than 10% of that. Well, you have the ability with VMC and AWS to scale that back and forth based on what you need. And then also we leverage via NJ Edge and the Edge network, our AWS Direct Connects. We have one up and going right now. We're still finishing up a second one so that, we have 2 direct connects out to AWS. And that's important because you're not traversing the public internet out there with your data, especially if you're dealing with HR, finance, student data, right? That's out there. You want to make sure it's secure. And also, we have our direct connect that gives us the ability to have wireline speeds like we're on-prem, just like it's in the cloud. So that was important. An important piece to this whole project was to be able to have the security, the speed, and really just the peace of mind that that it's safe and secure. Part of this project in my mind was always named Operation Sleep Easy, right? Because could we make it so that TCNJ was bulletproof? That, again, back to if the meteor hits, what would we be able to do? And then also, like Matt had mentioned about springboarding into other products in the AWS ecosystem. And, we chose AWS as our sole cloud provider at TCNJ, one based on the relationship with NJ Edge, and also the quote unquote the deals that they've worked out with AWS in terms of like no egress charges and that sort of thing. It just made it quote easy, right, to be able to do that. But it also then springboards into other projects and solutions like native Veeam backup into AWS. We did a proof of concept over the summer with Redshift and QuickSight and Athena for institutional reporting to be able to take. We took student data from our student information system, put it up in there, and then we're able to pull reports and do things like that. And we're maybe looking to scale that up to the next level, so to say, of can we bring in all our other sources of truth, like our HR, finance, Canvas for student grades, and and class data reporting, and then be able to layer those on top of each other and try to get that, like, what's the true cost to educate and graduate a student at TCNJ or any institution, right? Where are our cost centers? Like if you're an example would be, if you're an English major, does it cost the college less money to educate the English major as it does a STEM major or a chemistry or a biology major because of the resources that are there? And you wouldn't be able to pull that all together unless you had all those sources of truth in one spot to be able to pull those out. And that's where, we're looking at AWS and the other products that are out there to be able to, to do that. And, we already have the data. It's just a matter of them parsing through it and finding it. And again, back to the direct connects and the security for that, for that data. So, there's always challenges, and, I always say, well, give me a challenge and come up with a solution as well, right? Don't just give me challenges. So, what are some of the challenges that are out there? Well, you have applications that run on legacy infrastructure. That's always a challenge. You have an application that's been out there for years and years and years, perhaps a decade or two in some cases, right? So, can you take that legacy infrastructure and put it into a new modern solution like VMC on AWS? And the answer is yes, right? As Matt said, as long as you have the hardware or the software updates to be able to create a VMC cluster in AWS, that's fine. But then it's just spinning up another server and putting those resources on it and migrating those maybe from on-prem into the cloud and that sort of thing. So I wouldn't say that there's it'll solve every one of those challenges, but 90% is pretty good. In some areas that's an A, sometimes it's a B+ in some other education institutions. But if you can get 90%, then you're doing, that's a pretty good job. And then also back to, you get then also the safety, security, scalability, reliability of the VMC on AWS ecosystem on a legacy application and or piece of hardware. And then another challenge is meeting the needs of the staff of 10,000 staff and students. That's the round number that we use at TCNJ for, you got 10,000 staff and students, you could possibly have 10,000 different needs that are out there, and we do. So how do you meet those needs, and can you scale the infrastructure to do that? And I think back on when we went remote, TCNJ had absolutely no remote presence, no online presence except for the MBA program that had just started up at the time, and to the point where there was a very, I would say a headwind is probably the most politically correct term for putting classes online at TCNJ pre-COVID. The fact that we were able to shut down on a Tuesday and then come back that next Monday and do remote classes with products like at the time VMware Horizon Cloud for remote access for applications and everything else is a testament to the work that we had done before to make everything scalable, agile, and nimble. But then also at the time when everything kind of blew up with COVID, it was a matter of then that wasn't a huge heavy lift. Now there was work to be done, yes, but it wasn't like we were starting from scratch and we only had 4 days to do it. We already had the core, we had the foundation, and all we had to do then was scale it, and scaling it with AWS and scaling it with other vendors to be able to meet the needs now of 10,000 remote people, as opposed to maybe at the pre-COVID was 50, maybe 100 at most, right? So that was something that I think as a manager and a leader of the team, I'm proud of that we did that, but I'm also really proud of the team in that we were able to do that, and we had kind of been working towards that for a year or two before that, and we were able to pull that off. And it wasn't a fluke. We were on that mindset beforehand. So, and then also, a challenge of achieving overall reduction in IT spend. And this is one of those areas where I go back and forth, especially as a challenge, right? Because if your president, provost, someone else, in that the big chair up top doesn't see the value in IT right now at post-COVID, they may not ever see the value of IT after this, right? So that might be time to look for a new a new institution. So, you know, you can build on this and still reduce your spend, yes, but at the same time, I say it's you're really spending the same amount of money or resources, but you're using them in a better, more manageable, optimized way, and that will pay dividends over and over and over again. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that even if you had probably no increase in budget, but you had to stay the same, could you do more with that same amount or even less? My answer would be yes. And it's just a matter of being able to focus those resources and redeploy resources, and not, quote, babysit boxes anymore. One of the slides that Matt showed was, they do all the updates, they do all the, kind of the rote, boring stuff of, oh yeah, I got to go in there now and do this update, right? Well, we don't have to do that anymore. So therefore, now we can concentrate on what's our core mission of what we want to do in enterprise infrastructure and what we want to do on the server team, as opposed to just going in there and making sure, I got version XYZ 2.477, right? That's not, we need to get out of that business. So, and then the last one there is improving IT resilience and availability. Again, if the meteor hit, could we be able up and running and right? Well, not just bare minimum, but at this point, I think we could get along really well without it. And I think that that comes from even that was kind of ingrained in me when I was in K-12 when Sandy hit, and and we were one of the first K-12 districts to have cloud email and cloud services, and that that may be the true believer in the cloud, because while everyone else was trying to find a generator and gasoline to power up their Exchange server that was on-prem, I was literally sitting in a pool in Florida hanging out, sending emails, because we were using Office or Live at EDU at the time, right? So I've been a cloud evangelist for that amount of time.
If I can, Ron, if I can jump in, can you flip back to that last slide for a second?
Sure.
I want to pull in Matt here for a second and see if can you share the kind of VMC, the global perspective, if you will. Are these the kinds of are these challenges kind of common across the board that you see? Are there others that get people moving? And John, feel free to chime in too, because I know you've been on both sides of the fence at AWS and moving over to Effectual and helping to provide service. So just want to pull in some perspectives here and see if are these the things really driving these moves, or do we, are there other challenges in addition?
Yeah, so maybe I'll jump in first. So the answer is yeah. For most of my customers that I deal with in the space that we're in, as I mentioned, it's everything from academic medical centers to K-12s. A vast majority of them are leveraging common off-the-shelf software that's built on Windows. And those legacy applications and services that they've developed and built on year over year, those are the ones that they need to come up with models where they can have redundancy, backup, business continuity. And for a lot of them, maintaining that state of VMware, having a second or tertiary home where it can go, integrating in those native services, like Len mentioned, he's looking at groups like Veeam. The ability to leverage the power of AWS, maybe a pilot light of VMC on AWS, and the fact that it can scale up really quickly. So in the event of a disaster, we can turn on, roughly 4 additional hosts every 12 minutes to scale up to what you need. And when your disaster is over, you scale back. Because it's built on VMware and it's the same state, I can move that machine back on-prem without a problem. Whereas some other people, as they build it out, maybe they're going to go disaster to the cloud, but now there's no return trip. So yeah, so for vast majority of my customers that are leveraging, commercial products, commercial off-the-shelf products, this is simple and easy. And then I have that secondary group that, they're a bunch of developers. They want to do cool stuff. Like Len talked about, some of his schools are building out cool, new, interesting things. I have a lot of customers that are looking to do things with master data management, AI and ML analytics. How can they use their data better? That's a perfect place to expand use cases within the cloud. And it all kind of starts from that first step.
Mm-hmm. And John, are you guys seeing similar things? And maybe can you share a little bit about the one in orange here, looking at the overall IT spend? I know that's part of the focus of what you guys are, and maybe you can introduce the concept of what you guys are up to at Effectual with kind of building in the tenancy model and making that even a little bit more attractive from an IT spend perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I think most people anymore, I mean, one of their first things they want to do is, okay, I want, more for less. And that's where everybody's goal is in the beginning. But really the conversation needs to go and expand from there, is to focus on what's strategic to you, right? As educators, you're focused on getting people through college, right? That's the goal. That's your outcome that's important to your business. Inside of Effectual, our goal is to make sure that we are providing the services for you, and building the services for you, and then operating the services for you, so that you don't have to worry about those. And I think that's the the big conversation. These are definitely challenges, but the bigger conversation is like, are you doing what's going to focus and impact your business? And that's really what pushes the needle forward. So I was at a presentation one day. The guy put up a slide. It was the best slide, and it's always been in my brain, is that thanks for running that virtual machine, said no CEO ever, because that really wasn't important to them. But creating a new product, creating a new application that's going to change customer engagements, that's the value add, and that's where you should focus. So yeah, one of our practices inside of Effectual is about it's not really a reduction of IT spend, but it's spending your taking that money and spending it wisely. Sometimes that is, we can reduce the cost per line item. Other times it's being able to get more effective and efficient with your dollar.
Also with that green column there, the applications running on legacy infrastructure. I mean, we literally up until last year had a Sun Microsystems server physical bare metal box that was about to turn 21. I mean, we had plans to give it a birthday party and like crack a bottle of champagne over it. We were just basically, we were trying to just get every one of the applications that had hosted these old legacy apps, and even some old homebrew apps that were related to travel and adjunct contract systems. Once, we were migrating over to new solutions for those. And as soon as those were done and we could say, all right, we're turning this thing off. I mean, that was like the last of the old legacy. Literally, there were two of those boxes. One got decommissioned 2 years ago, and the other one got decommissioned about 8 months ago. Part of this. So, like I said, there's nothing that you can say, oh no, never, that'll never, it's not going to support that. You can make it happen. It's just a matter of what are the resources that you want to put into it to make it happen.
Yep. Makes sense. I think, Len, you had one more slide, and then we'll get into probably the bulk of the discussion and bounce around here a bit. So, outcomes, everyone say, well, hey, what was the outcome of, what's the outcome of all this? Well, we cut our replacement costs by 50 to 75%. And I talk about the utility cost saving. So it's all about, taking out racks and physical racks of servers in, let's say, Green Hall that we have. And, when we took out, I believe it was, I want to say it was a total of 3 racks total, but, each time we did that, it was, cost savings, because you remember it costs money to run those servers, right? They're running 24/7. Some of them are kind of old, like that Sun server, not very efficient. We use I'll give a shout out to Dell. We're a Dell shop for our servers, our physical boxes. If you go to the Dell power calculator on their website, pump in the service tag ID number, it knows the configuration of that server, and you put in your cost per kilowatt hour, and it'll tell you what does it cost to run that server 24/7, 5 by 24, whatever terms that you run it. Most of us run 24/7, 365. And then the rule of thumb that they have on that calculator is take whatever the cost is that you cost to run it, and then double it, because that's what it costs to cool it. So when we start decommissioning servers, we made a conscious effort to basically analyze this, and we're fully realized 25K in annual utilities cost savings, right? So that's and then it goes also to our green initiative, and everything else that comes along with saving money on electricity. So another one is recovery point times. How quickly can we get back to business?
I'll give it, another shout out to another product is Veeam with their Veeam Orchestrator. That's another product that'll be able, you can basically, it simulates all your disaster recovery, business continuity, and get you, it says, this is where things worked and worked well, because you can back up, but can you recover, as Matt had talked about before. Can you get from point A to B, but can you get from B back to A, and in a decent amount of time? And that orchestrator will run through all those different scenarios, and it'll tell you where your weak points are, or where your return trip was elongated because of an issue. And it gives you this night, and you can run it weekly, monthly, however, you want to run it daily, you can run it daily. But it gives you this nice, neat little PDF package that tells you all this. And so when you go to your cyber insurance brokers or your insurance brokers, and they say, well, if you had a disaster, what would it take and how long would it take to recover? You give them that PDF, and that ends that conversation really quick. So and that they like that, and it'll reduce your premiums as well. And then back to leveraging existing skill sets, right? We moved to the cloud, but it wasn't like we had to learn something totally new. We used all the skill sets that we had already in VMware and just used them in a different way to a different medium, the cloud, as opposed to on-prem. They're literally, the interfaces in VMC on AWS are, if you didn't know any better, you would probably think you were working on the on-prem ESX host, right? So, and then employee morale. I mean, you're not babysitting boxes anymore, right? It's not that, who likes to get that phone call on Saturday that says, hey, something's not working, I need you to come in, right? Nobody. So that's the fact is that, it improves morale, because now we know stuff will, quote, just work. And that always, the back of your mind, you're always worried about, is something going to go wrong, something not going to work, something going to break down. That starts to ease out. And I will say that that's it's a definite mental health bonus. So, all right. So that's pretty much, the end of mine. I don't know, Effectual, if anybody wants, or Adam, you want to take it from here or do Q&A?
Yeah, I think we'll jump in with a couple questions for discussion here for the group. And thanks so much for sharing that about the journey that you guys had at TCNJ. And like you said, you had you had a very kind of well-developed VMware infrastructure to start with as you started moving there. Matt, can you speak to kind of the size of VMware implementation, where VMC kind of makes a lot of sense to go it alone for an institution to go and make that investment? And then I think that's also an opportunity to show maybe where that break even is, that it might not be the best implementation for every school, but this resource pool concept with Effectual really comes in so that we have a solution to offer everybody. And I'd like to invite John to get into that a little bit. But can you speak to the right size, the right use case for VMC to start?
Yeah, 100%. So for us, VMware Cloud and AWS, like I mentioned, it's a full managed service. We're going to handle the OS layer down, so you own the OS layer up. And it really starts with 3 physical hosts, right? So you may hear it called nodes, host, 3 EC2 instances, bare metal, right? And from a size perspective, it's about 512 memory, 10 terabytes of storage, up to 768 and 40 terabytes of storage times 3, right? And it works just like it does on-prem. So, you're going to have those N+1, if you will. So for a lot of our customers, that's the starting point. So even if you have 1,000 VMs, I have customers that start with 3 nodes in the cloud, integration of some of our native services. Like I mentioned, FSX, don't put big storage on that because it can get really expensive. Don't put your backups on that. We have great native services. Focus on things that are really meant to be on VM. So focus on the server side. And then we have other customers where maybe to get started, you have 10 VMs. And I recognize certainly some of the names on the attendee list where we tried to go down the VMware Cloud and AWS route. It was too expensive, mainly because they only had a few workloads. And that's where our partners like Effectual came in, and they developed a solution where you now have the ability to create a shared tenancy model within VMware Cloud on AWS, and the ability to get started smaller. But they also have additional services that they can layer on top and help take you above and beyond that OS level. So, John, I don't know if you want to dive a little bit more into what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. I mean, right, your buy unit for VMC on AWS typically is a server, an i3 metal or an i3 EN metal, and that's it. So it's a few $1,000s a pop. We take that and kind of flip it on its head and say, okay, tell us how much gig of RAM you need and gig of disk you need, and just pay for the drip that way. So it's giving you the cloud economics you want inside of VMC on AWS and allows you to kind of scale your business as you need it, as you grow, but then also start with a very, very small footprint and then continue to grow from there. To make it to your life even easier, then we round it out with operational services that you're typically probably doing today. So monitoring, management of an operating system, patching, security, backups, all that fun stuff. You can pick and choose your adventure and say, okay, Effectual, we want you to monitor and back it up. Great, we'll do that for you. It's an all monthly recurring fee, so it's pay as you go, exactly what you want with cloud economics.
Yeah, so it helps to kind of right size that implementation rather than having to jump into the full 3 nodes right from the start.
You got it. Yeah. So if a full 3 nodes from the start, Matt, what's that? Like $8,000, $9,000 roughly a month?
Yeah, depending upon the sizing, it certainly can get up there.
Yeah. So you can start here with a few instances for a few $100s a month instead.
Yeah.
One of the cool things too, and we'll leave customer names out, but we worked on a project for an organization where we brought in Effectual. We helped build out and pay for a pilot environment where we were able to bring them in. The use case was to extend their SaaS workload out to the cloud. So bringing in Effectual, we brought that VM out, but then also Effectual, right? They're leaving out a big part is they're one of our key AWS partners. So they were able to bring in a bunch of native services to augment a very storage heavy VM, leverage our S3 buckets, and allowed this customer to get started incredibly small financial investment. But again, getting the scale of the cloud because of the expertise Effectual brings to the table. So I think for us, in my business specifically in public sector, almost 100% is transacted through partners, right? And that's where folks like Effectual really come in and bring value, helping customers in those initial journeys to AWS.
Yeah.
Stage one is definitely, some of that lift and shift, and I'm sure everybody is familiar with that term. I mean, to get the kind of the servers running and operating, at a more efficient, cost or even operational standpoint. But yeah, day 2 is where the fun really happens. So we can help customers with their drive towards data analytics. So we have a platform where you can basically bring us the data. We'll help you build dashboards from it, that kind of stuff, and then a ton of app modernization, especially in the higher ed sector. So we do a lot of mainframe modernization, try to kill those off as fast as possible, as those are definitely a bear in everybody's data center. It's the true diamond that lasts forever. So we try to collect that and then simplify it for everybody's life. And then even we have a lot of companies come to us that they say, okay, we're kind of sick of doing, the same stuff over and over again. We want to rewrite applications, especially as, the demands are changing and shifting. You mentioned, Len, in your business or in your school, you saw it. Okay, everybody had to go remote. Well, what does that mean? Can the same applications that we have today work for the remote? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we can actually help customers rewrite those and get a little bit more closer to what the customer is actually looking for.
Yeah, so growing some capabilities along with the VMC on AWS.
Yeah, the cloud should never be a destination. It's always a journey. And I'm sure you've heard everybody say that, but I mean, that's the truth behind it. If you're going to it as to say, okay, it's a destination, well, it's another data center, but you have to think about all the steps you're going to take on after that.
Yeah. Well, and the start of that journey can be a challenge. And Len, maybe you could share here a bit about the migration piece of that journey and whether it was as expected, easy or harder, and then maybe Matt and John, if you guys can jump in from there and help to walk us through some of the services and support that you guys might be able to provide through that migration journey to get started.
I will say at the time when I started at TCNJ, there was really no off-prem or cloud presence that we had, right? So we really were starting from scratch. We leveraged Matt and our VMware TAM at the time, our technical account manager, Julian, at the time, really just to take like, okay, what do we got on-prem, and then what can we do better and more efficiently? How can we evolve this? And they, basically gave us, here are some options. Here's option A, option B, option C, what works for you. And I think it really is all about just, you get the phrase that I use a lot is, option paralysis, right? Like, or choice paralysis. And, or you go to that initial like AWS screen, and I'm going to bash on that a little bit, Matt. Like, you go to set up that first, VM in AWS, and you're like, I just hit that radio button and change the storage type, and why did the cost triple? Like, it didn't give me any, like, why did, any reason why, like, what's the difference? Like, why is that one more money than the other one? And you kind of need a, another doctorate in how to configure AWS resources. So I think it's really that hand-holding piece in the beginning, and just that guide, right? Or you want to be like equated to the, the little kid birthday party at the bowling alley. We're going to put up the bumpers on the gutters and roll the ball down and see how many pins we can knock over. But we know we're not going to lose if we got that guide on the side.
Yeah, and Len, great kind of call out, right? And that's where I do believe partnership helps solve a lot of those risk problems, right? And there is a lot of tools built into the AWS service, budgets, things like that. And that's really where folks like myself and my team and our partners like Effectual can really help you build like what that path could look like. And it starts as simple as things like an RV tool export, where we look at what kind of data you have, what are good workloads for VMware Cloud, what are good workloads for those other native services that we talked about. But then also, what's your journey expectation, right? Is it a migration because you have to get out of a data center, or a big colo hosting fee? And then to what John said, it's, to me, the stabilize and optimize opportunity that really helps to pull back the cost models. And then modernization. What I see there for a lot of customers is, what are we doing? Should we be retiring this solution and moving to a SaaS-based solution? Should we be building net new? Maybe we want to get into the world of Kubernetes and containers. There's 100 different options and 100 different ways to go and expand. And that's truly why, for me, cloud is a really cool place to get started. But again, working with partners like Effectual and NJ Edge, it really does help kind of demystify some of those complexities that Len mentioned.
I think the other thing, another piece to that too is, what type of organization are you? Are you a centralized IT organization, or are you decentralized? And for us, we're highly centralized. So we have that heavy hand, so to say, and to be able to do it and do it pretty quickly in that respect. Whereas I could see if you're in a decentralized IT environment where each school had its own IT department and solutions, then it would really, be it would probably be an elongated process. So I think, as to Matt's point, there's 100 different problems. You can find 100 different solutions. It's just a matter of what's going to figure, what works best for your institution, and what's your end goal, and how can you reverse engineer that to make it work for you.
And Len, you made a really good point. So when I got started like 2 years ago working with Effectual, the initial use case that they were helping us solve was really around a shared service provider for state level, right? States were looking to go and deliver this, but they had to be a state shared service provider. So multiple agencies were trying to come in and access resources. And that's really where, that first sort of generation of working with Effectual came to be for me, was helping the states identify how can they help offload some of that shared service. So if a end user needs to come in from the Department of Psychology, say, for your orgs, and I want to consume 5 VMs, and maybe the Department of Health needs 10, and so forth, how do you aggregate all those into one cloud platform? That's really where Effectual solution in this multi-tenancy shows huge value back to the business.
Yep, makes sense there. And I, one of the other kind of concerns that we, hear come up as people consider moving to the cloud, obviously, is security. If, where they're going to put their infrastructure, their data is not under institutional control, there's always that question, right? So can you speak a little bit, Matt, to AWS's approach to security and where that stops? And then John, a bit about Effectual's approach there, and kind of the added level of handholding and security that comes into those resource pools and the SOC monitoring and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So AWS, we have a shared security model, right? So I always like to use the example of S3 buckets. S3 buckets are default by when you build them out. But if you open up all the ports, well, you open up all the ports. So it is, most of what we do is going to be secure by default, right? And as you start to build out what those environments look like, that's where you're going to start to identify, hey, what do I want to give access to? Who do I want to give access to, right? And we have all those security things in place. We're responsible for the data center assets, right? So all the things that reside in there, that's what we work on. And that's where, again, kind of, I will toss to John, is that's where bringing in partners to help you identify how you want to build out your security, how you want to give access to, and even things like VMware Cloud on AWS. I kind of went over it quickly in the beginning, but it does come with NSX on it, right? So NSX is what VMware uses to build zero trust security. So if you want to isolate by port and protocol, what application can talk to what application, or what web tier can talk to what database tier, or hey, it shouldn't, it really needs to go to the app tier. All those things are definable within the platform. And that means that you can secure everything within your environment. So, but John, do you want to talk a little bit more about where you kind of help partner or help customers as well?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we take it from the shared responsibility model inside of AWS and kind of take it up the stack. So inside of the operating system, inside of the application. So it's still, there's still a lot of, hand holding and working with the customer to make sure that we know what to secure and how to secure it. But it's something where we have 24/7 engineers looking at the platform, understanding what's going on, actually doing threat hunting, that type of thing. To make sure that anything new that's coming out in the world, we'll know about it. We'll be able to apply rules against it and make sure that we can remediate any issues for our customers. So it's really, what you probably hope your security team is doing right now. We put an SLA on it and guarantee it.
I think one other thing all you have to do too is go hit up YouTube and watch any one of those Werner Vogel's videos of security by default, right? Security built into AWS platform. And that's great. I always say, that's great. AWS did, what they need to do for that. And then I just want to make sure that we're secure based on our, protocols and what we need for, for HIPAA and, or for, any other, all the other protocols that we need to be secure for. So, you take the innate or the baked in security of AWS, layer yours on top of it, and then you should be good.
Yep,
makes sense. I'll start with John here. What are some of the common obstacles or maybe gotchas that you see with organizations as they think about moving to the cloud? As they're a lot of schools that Edge works with are still kind of in that process of getting ready to go. What do they need to be thinking about and making sure that they kind of have lined up and ready to go to make that move? Have you seen common obstacles, gotchas, things we should be thinking about?
Yeah, typically the biggest common obstacle is people themselves. So they create uncertainty inside of their own world. They get into this analysis paralysis and nothing ever gets done. And that's the one thing that, when I was at AWS previously, the goal was to start getting experimenting right away, right? So don't be afraid of it. Go and learn it and educate yourself on it, and then quickly move to it. And that usually will, create better long-term, outcomes for that business or for that school in this case. And so, figure out how to move fast. So don't try to be an obstacle, just kind of, hammer through. At this point, it's kind of a proven thing that, okay, you will be able to enhance and get new business outcomes if you start to move your data to the cloud. So adjust, embrace that and kind of move forward. That's probably the biggest thing. The second would be if you're going to do this analysis, like, be honest with yourself. There's probably majority of your data center that can be retired. I've worked with schools specifically. I did one of my previous world, an online school was one of my biggest customer, and when we shut off 25-30% of their servers and nobody even noticed. So think about that. So understand that if you properly go through this journey. And you're honest with yourself, you could probably be able to cut and reduce, a significant amount of your spend just by, shutting things off or, moving things maybe to a new platform, like a SaaS platform, something like that, and then move forward. So biggest two things, make sure that you move and you fail fast. And then two, you only take what you need. Don't move the whole house if it's not necessary.
How do you kind of find the right applications or the right places to do that? The take what you need idea. What's the approach?
So in our world, I mean, one of the things that we first do before we get into these projects is actually do an assessment and understand what's on, what's working, what's not working. It's easy to find. I mean, especially if the servers are running Windows 2003, 2008, something like that, that's been spinning for a while. Yeah, maybe it's not as important as you think, and you're just kind of carrying it along because you're afraid of the unknown. So take those unknowns and turn them into knowns and find out if you need it or not need it and go from there. But we have tools that will come in, go and map the environment. We can look and see network traffic, that kind of stuff to see, okay, is this thing even being accessed? And then quickly determine whether it needs to be retired or actually rehosted.
I'll say one of the things we did, I should probably get some commissions from these folks, right? To use a product called Cloud Chomp, and it, basically sits on these servers for 30, 60, 90 days, and then comes back, gives you a report and says, I can take your whole data center for $77,000 a month, shift it all to AWS. All you have to do is hit this button and it'll do it, which is kind of scary, but it'll do it. But what it did was it pinpointed the ones where we just, we didn't need them anymore, or they were just, so overclocked and over horsepower for what they were doing. It basically said, hey, you can get rid of this box and for, X amount of dollars, put it up in AWS and we'll right size it for the load that it's supposed to have. And you don't have to worry about, we had one server that was it was basically just a report generating application for our PeopleSoft SIS instance. And, it was a bare metal box just for that one. It was a one trick pony. So we were able to just take that down and move it into AWS and it was gone. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and it was, it cost us like $2,500 a year just to run that thing.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So another kind of common concern as we're looking at, any members that might think about moving live applications into the cloud is always the worry about any downtime and actually being able to get to their own stuff and keep it up. And Matt, you had a stat in there from VMC on AWS. I think it was a 76% reduction in downtime. So I think that kind of gets over some of those concerns. Can you speak to how you guys make that happen and make sure that schools can stay up and have that confidence?
Sure, absolutely. So as long as you're running a virtual distributed switch in your environment, right? So VDS, you may hear it termed. We have the ability with VMware Cloud and AWS to connect to it with our platform called HCX, our hybrid cloud connector. And what we can do is actually extend layer 2 up into the cloud. So you can take that live VM, migrate it up into the cloud, retaining the same drivers, IP address, everything, and be able to have it reside up in VMC and AWS. So simple, easy to use, love to prove it too, right? So one of the big things, customers always ask me is, hey man, that sounds great, but my environment's unique. And like I mentioned, we've had 8,400 plus unique environments that we want to prove it out. So we have resources available that if it is something that you want to go and take a look at, we could bring in partners like Effectual to help build out a pilot environment, showcase to you how the solution could work for you. And of course, we work with NJ Edge. If you're looking for direct connects, that's the exact same way that we would do it with Len, is how we would do with a lot of the customers on the call as well. But that all being said, it really does come down to the applications, how your environment's built today. It's really just, how do we help you get started?
Yeah, and the Edge network does have that peering connectivity with the AWS infrastructure. So from a quality of service perspective, nice to have you guys one hop right there. So anything live should be, almost like it's right at the member network too. So that's always good to see as well. So I think just time for a few more questions here. And looking at some of the technical challenges, and John, you've been on both the AWS and Effectual side. What have you guys seen as kind of some of the bigger technical challenges that stop people from getting going, either from a network or security perspective or otherwise?
Trying to think. I mean, VMware made it pretty easy. So if you're using a modern operating system, we have access to operate using HCX. To move a workload is something you basically schedule, and it's as fast as really, if you're familiar with vMotion and how it works inside of your local data center today, it's very similar, just extended out into AWS. we run into some, some technical hurdles as far as, sometimes age of applications or having local dependencies or hardware-based dependencies. But typically all those can be worked through. I mean, that's where we have solution architects on the front end of it that basically can give you the full scope within around 30 minutes to an hour, because we've seen so many of these over the years. So we can quickly tell you, where we're going to run into some potholes and start working through and engineering around those problems. But I've moved crazy Oracle rack environments, Exadata, that kind of stuff, which is sometimes challenging. You can make it work and figure it out how to make it work inside of VMC. Again, need some more engineering, some time on it.
Yeah, Adam, I have a very direct answer that I run into every time. And it's usually for the larger organizations that are dispersed. It's when your networking team and your security team and your infrastructure team are not working together, right? This is a holistic conversation, because when we're opening up ports and protocols within your routers and your firewalls, we need to make sure everybody's on the same page. If you have change control windows that are Sunday at 2 a.m., if we miss it, now it's a 2-week wait or a 3-week wait. It really is those upfront conversations, and we work with your teams and with our partners to put together what that plan looks like, identify what needs to happen, what ports protocols need to be available, what IP segments we need, all those types of things. And it really is the upfront orchestration of bringing everybody in that makes these really successful. Yeah. So that for me is probably my number one delay. It has nothing to do with sort of my environment, your environment. It's really making sure the highway's connected correctly.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's oh, go ahead. Sorry, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick. I mean, if you have the people aligned and the cultural focus is to make this move successful, life is so much easier. Like the technical hurdles are so minor compared to the cultural hurdles if that doesn't exist.
It's people process. It's not
yeah. So like a clear direction from the top saying this is the way has always sped up every migration that I've been on.
So Len, the $1 million question, how'd you get everybody how'd we get everybody aligned and on the same page and headed in this direction? What did it take? And
come on, Adam, it's my charming personality and my good dad jokes,
That's a great starting point, right?
Now, I think, you got to set the vision and the tone, right? And say, well, this is where we're going. And this is how I think it's about trying to say, well, this is how it's going to make things better. And I hate, being like that, that guy that says, it's going to be better. Just trust me. Right. Well, you got to get some backing on it and then pull through and actually do it. Right. Because you can't say it's going to work. It's going to work. It's going to be better. And then you get 3/4 of the way there and everybody retreats. Right. And then it's just a mess. Right. So you got to actually have some successes. And I think you can't, the other phrase I use all the time is, we're not going to eat this burrito in one bite, right? It's going to be like chomp after chomp after chomp. Well, same thing. Like you got to have quick, early, easy successes, get those under your belt and then move forward. And then that gives everybody confidence, because as soon as you run into that first hurdle, you better have a couple of wins under your belt. You don't want the first hurdle to be the first thing you hit or have multiple, losses in a row. You got to be able to, to build confidence. And show that at the end of this journey, right, it's going to be better and maybe in a sense of, hey, now you don't have to worry about those boxes on Saturday. You don't have to remember you used to always have to do Windows updates every other Wednesday or whatever. Like now we don't, whatever. It's just, it gets that minutia out of the way and you can focus on like what's really important.
Yeah. So I guess, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I'll add to Len's team as well. So I was personally engaged with a lot of their deployment. I think the other big thing is Len had his team forward, right? So like I said, security was there, networking was there, infrastructure was there, almost a SWAT team type approach. And we did a series of enablements before we kicked off. So it wasn't like just flip the switch overnight, right? We made sure everybody understood, hey, here's the next steps, here's what we're doing. And it really was a plan to bring everybody together. And it was full buy-in, right? So I do think it's important to call out that Len and his team specifically came together with the right attitude, the right approach. That hey, we want to make this thing successful. We brought in a partner, right? So we helped fund some partner resources as well. So bring in expertise to the table to ensure that everything worked out well for the college.
I think that's a good point too, in that us at TCNJ, we're doing this once, right? Whereas like, Effectual and AWS, they're doing this over and over and over and over again, right? So, you can watch all the YouTube videos you want, but sometimes you just need to bring in the people that know, hey, look, we ran into this snafu 2 months ago, and here's how we fixed it, where it's not your first rodeo, right? When we're, like I said, we're only doing this one time. They've done it hundreds of times or whatever, right? So and that builds some confidence in there as well.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think especially for some of the smaller schools that don't have as large an IT team, maybe, or even getting down to the K-12 level, who have just a few folks kind of supporting the VMware environment. That's really important. And for those that are gonna look at that tenancy model, John, can you share a little bit about kind of the support and resources that Effectual has available to kind of partner with the member institutions that are looking at that?
Yeah, absolutely. So big or small, whatever works for us. And again, we can kind of choose, your own adventure here. So yeah, the end goal, I mean, what we could provide is the VMware environment for you to operate your VMs, all the operational pieces to kind of make sure that the care and feeding is done, so that your team doesn't have to. So the best way to do that is we can have a conversation and see what where your needs are. But if you need two VMs hosted and you don't want to deal with management, patching, everything that Len was talking about, that's fine. We'll take that on and we'll operate that as a service for you.
Yeah, great. So I think unless we get any more questions, I think we're almost getting ready to wrap up. And I want to share just a couple of slides as we wrap up that kind of give a bit more information there and some next steps. So we have gotten together with Effectual to build these dedicated resource pools for Edge members that enable you to do some of that operational stuff along with Effectual, with a lot of these features really built into it, including additional security, including administrative support and patching and things like that, which is really, really key, being able to give time back to the institution's technology teams like Len was talking about, and help to make them a little more strategic and a little more effective at providing that support inside their organizations, and not have to worry about as much of that care and feeding as they go through. And this is all stuff that we can really get into the weeds on if you're interested with your individual, each individual institution. And that's, I think, what comes next, right? If you're interested in taking a look at VMC on AWS, we have a number of options for you as we've explored here. Matt and his team are always available, as well as the Effectual folks, and working through Edge, we can pull the right people in at the right time. So we'll be able to help you kind of map what that next step looks like for your VMware journey into the cloud, and what total cost of ownership might look like. We've built in a bit of a kind of total cost of ownership calculator with the Effectual team to take a look at where your VMware implementations are today and what they might look like as you move them into the cloud in one of these resource pool kind of environments. Matt talked about as well the opportunity to launch in with proof of concept. VMC has done plenty of those. You talked about the one use case that you did here in New Jersey, I believe, Matt. Anything else you want to add on that proof of concept point before we break?
Just like I said, it really is, let's look at what you're looking to try to do. Do we need to bring in our native services as well? And it can be all encompassing. So the door's kind of wide open. Tell us what you want to go do, and let's go figure it out together.
Yep. And then the funding and support for migration, which is key, and tends to be one of the, if you're looking at making this move, one of the immediate bigger line items. I know AWS can provide some support there. What does that look like? How do we get involved and engage partners there?
Yeah, 100%. So we have programs like MAP, our migration assistance, as well as our partner opportunity acceleration. So we do have a lot of programs that will help fund customers and partners during that assess phase. So looking at what's going on within your environment, what do you need to do? Mobilize, getting you ready for the move, and then migration. So again, it goes back to, love to talk to whoever wants to understand what that migration could look like. We could bring in our partners like Effectual to come help you understand what that journey is. And then, again, here at AWS, our goal is to help support you in that migrational journey. So let us bring forward all the programs we can to help support you.
Great. And that's what this is all about, right? That's why Edge is here. That's why we're interested in helping our members do this, right? Is to find that success, find the right partners at the right time to make it happen, and hopefully make that journey easier, better, and achieve some of those outcomes right along the lines of what Len was highlighting and the success that TCNJ has had. I think we want to help as many of our members replicate that as we can. And I think we have the right team lined up to do it. So you can expect some of the Edge support team probably to reach out. And if you have any questions, we're always here to help. And we'll pull in the folks from AWS and Effectual to make that stuff happen at the right time. So I haven't seen any additional questions come across. I think we're just about ready to break here today. I just want to take a moment to thank everybody who participated on the call for attending, and then to thank you guys, Matt, John, and Len, for spending so much time here with us today and kind of helping us see the angles of this evolution from on-prem VMware into the cloud. Any parting thoughts before we break, guys?
No, I think, I'm always available to talk peer-to-peer and give you the real deal.
And just thank you for the opportunity. Love always working with Len and NJ Edge and Effectual. So same, anything you need, just feel free to reach out to me.
Ditto.
Great. So I'll just as a closing note, I'll make sure to get the recording out to everyone, as well as the contact info for today's panelists and any content that we can share. So thanks again so much, everybody, for joining us today. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.